Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Hello and welcome to this segment of the Venus Project CCN show. My name is Joe Park. I'm one of many volunteers at TVP Activism. Two other TVP activists are here with me. We have the point of contact for Spain, Sue Everatt, and the point of contact for Slovenia, Saso Luznar. We are going to be discussing two myths about the Venus Project that you may have heard. Perhaps you've seen someplace that the Venus Project is some kind of techno-dictatorship, or maybe you've read online somewhere that the Venus Project is a utopia. Well, we're here to set the record straight, and we're going to be doing so by using some real quotes from Jacque Fresco during the TVP seminars from 2011 and 2012. So let's get to it. First up is techno-dictatorship. Here's what Jacque Fresco has to say about that.
Does cyber government tell you what to do? No. It only informs you as to what's available, what's not available, what we do know, and what we don't know. This is not a dictatorship. This is based upon scientific evidence to support a given project. If you want to put up a building, say a half a mile high, the material has to be available. Using statistics is not a dictatorship. It's a method of getting the most from existing resources.
And from those two quotes, we hear it straight from Jacque Fresco himself. The Venus Project is not a dictatorship. Let me repeat that. The Venus Project is not a dictatorship. It's not a dictatorship of any way, shape, or form. It's not a place where computers rule over everything and everybody. It is a place where the scientific method is used, therefore the best and most accurate data is applied. So Sue, what would you like to say about that?
Okay, well, this is a topic that a lot of people get nervous about. They think the machines are going to tell us what we've got to do in absolutely every aspect of our lives, and it's not that way at all. The machines are there to do the things that we can't do, or that they can do better than us. You know, like, for example, it's a question of collecting data. It's a question of using that data to arrive at decisions. And we use this system today many times. For example, an inventory in a shop or a big store, when a product passes through the cash point, it's automatically noted down that, for example, one packet of cereals has been bought, so that they're making an automatic inventory then, and then they know how many more packets of cereals to buy to restock the shelves. It's a simple question of efficiency using it's not a question of them saying you will buy this packet of cereals. It's how many packets of cereals have been bought, which then shows which cereals the population likes and need to be produced.
Okay, Saso, what do you think?
Yeah, well, there's another aspect I feel of this question. I think mostly people are a little bit apprehensive or even afraid of Cyber Nation because of a couple of things, but one of them is technological unemployment. So people are losing jobs because of technology, because of automation, robots, and things like that. And then also, of course, there's our popular social media and movies that have also kind of exploited this for science fiction purposes. And so we have these, movies about the rise of machines and things like that. But in actuality, the machines are tools that we use. And just because we use them, that doesn't mean that the machine is telling us what to do. Just like your phone or your laptop computer, it doesn't force you to do anything, but you can perform tasks better and faster and communicate with more people, etc. So all of those things are just the benefit. There's no force behind it that will dictate what you have to do.
Saso, would you compare this kind of system to when people use a calculator or spell checker or a GPS unit where these technologies aren't telling people what to do, but rather they are merely feeding them the best information available?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're in an age of technological advancements and new information daily, and each one of us just don't have the processing power to have all this information in our brain. So these tools are exactly what you said. They just make our lives easier, and they, can keep track of many parameters that we just can't. So a computer, a calculator, like you mentioned, it doesn't force you to use it. You can do it on your own, if you want, by hand, and calculate all sorts of integrals and whatnot. But bottom line, if the computer does it faster, that's the tool that you want to use. And you can see that in all sorts of research. You can see that in your private life. It's used everywhere, and it's not dictatorial. It doesn't tell you what to do, but it gives you the option of doing things that maybe you can't do on your own.
Another example is the bathroom scale that I bought last week. All it does is tell me how much I weigh. That's it.
A little bit of humor there. I think the bathroom scales might tell you that you need to go on a diet, but then again, that's up to you whether you do or not. I was also thinking along the lines of hospitals that have so many life-saving machines that inform the doctors and the nurses when medication needs to be changed in some way, whether they need more of a medication, less of a medication, breathing apparatuses, or automatic breathing apparatuses that keep people alive. This kind of thing, we don't see them as a threat today. And this is the kind of thing that we're talking about for the future. Machines helping us, not taking over.
Okay, so now that we understand that machines won't be dictating over our lives, what about the kind of lifestyle that we can expect to have in the Venus Project? Here's Jacque Fresco from the TeamSpeak seminar talking about that subject.
What if a person doesn't want to live in the Venus Project? Can they live their own lifestyle? Yes, they can. They don't have to live under the Venus Project. If there's a religious group that wants to build its own community and wants nothing to do with the Venus Project, say the Amish people, they are free to live any lifestyle they want to. If people do not identify with the Venus Project, they will not join us. So they have their independence, they can live any lifestyle they want to. We believe that eventually most people will join with the Venus Project and unify the world toward common goal. You can't force that. If you don't want to wear the clothing recommended, that's up to you. You don't have to conform. You can wear any kind of clothing you want to. You can believe in any religion you want to, but you cannot superimpose your values on telecommunication systems. You can tell people what you believe and why you believe it, but you can't twist anyone's arms or force anyone into your point of view.
We've just heard some quotes by Jacque Fresco about how people would be living in the Venus Project. I would just like to remind our listening audience that in the Venus Project, everything is available to everybody without a price tag and without submitting to labor. In addition, there are no laws or law enforcements, and as Saso, Sue, and myself had just discussed, computers are not going to interfere in your lifestyle. They just tell you what's available. They just give you the latest information. I think that people would have easier access to the lifestyles that they wanted in the Venus Project as compared to our modern day system, which relies on money. So Sue, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that people are afraid of this kind of comment, but they need to think about just how free we are today to live as we want to. First of all, we're totally dependent on how much money we earn. That limits us tremendously to how free we are. You can't travel if you haven't got the money. You can't even buy the clothes that you want from the shops if you haven't got the money. And when you can buy the clothes that you want from the shops, you're limited to the fashion of the year. If you want to find something outside of the length of skirts or how many buttons on a shirt or whether the trouser legs have flares, it's what there is in the shops that you can buy, unless you happen to sew and you can make your own. But then you're going to be limited to the fabric that you can buy to make those clothes with. Where you live is very much limited as well to what you can afford to pay, either to buy a house or to rent. So are we really free today? We're not. Whereas in the future, in the resource-based economy, we won't have this kind of limitation. We'll be able to travel the world without having to pay for tickets, without visas to get into a country. We'll be able to go and live for 6 months in Japan if we want to, and then go to the Arctic or whatever. And as our mentality towards what is fashionable and what is functional will have changed, we will no longer be slaves to the fashion world. So, for example, I see young girls in winter wearing short tops with the belly on show, and it's cold, but the fashion is that. Now, this is silly, and to wear high heels, which are damaging to the bones in your foot and then your posture, all this kind of thing. We need to get rid of this crap from our heads and look to what is really good for the body. If we're in cold weather, we need to be warm. We don't need to be following fashion. So let's just think a little bit about how we live today and whether we're really free and why we're not, and then realize that in a resource-based economy, so many more doors will be open to us because all these restrictions would have disappeared.
Saso, I'm sure you've dealt with this subject many times. What is your input?
Yeah, this is pretty common. I think it kind of comes back to similar concern than before about the technology, that, there's some kind of cultural pressure that, we're going to force people to live this way or else, which is not the approach that we're looking for. What we want to do is we want to present people with a lifestyle that they will want to embrace because they're going to see that it's so much more beneficial to them. So some of the things that Sue already mentioned, I don't want to go over it again, but things that are just not available today. And when somebody can not just describe that to you, but demonstrate that to you when you kind of walk through a city like that, then I think there's not a person in this world that would not see the benefits of this type of lifestyle, even though you might be giving up from the point of view of, material things. Like somebody will say, well, I want to have a supercar, is everybody going to have a supercar? Well, in that mentality, when you're talking about a resource-based economy, nobody's going to want a supercar. Owning a supercar is a pain in the ass. What you want is an efficient means of transportation. And then the second point that is also made in these snippets from Jacque is that, people don't have to live in the cities if they don't want to. It's not enforced in any kind of way. If they want to live on their own somewhere in the cabin in the woods, they can do that. If there's, people that have their own communities like Amish people or, Native American or whatever kind of indigenous people that want to live on their own, they can definitely do that. And I think they're still going to be better off in a resource-based economy because we as a developed society are not going to pollute their environment and destroy, their water sources and all these things. So there is no, there's a win-win situation regardless if you want to live in a city or not. But I think the cities in the future are going to be so much more hospitable that many of the people will choose to live in the city because it's going to be in many ways similar to what is today in nature, outside of the cities.
I think this concern stems from what people have seen in the movies or read in sci-fi books, and those medias are really designed to sell. They're selling box office tickets, they're selling more paperbacks at the store or online, Amazon.com, so on and so forth. But we're talking about an entirely different system. We're talking about something that would be ideal, beneficial for everybody.
And as Sasha was saying, the cities of today scare people away because they're so polluted, they're so noisy, they're so overcrowded and so on. But the cities that Jacque suggests, that the Venus Project proposes, will be so much healthier. There won't be any noise from traffic, there won't be any pollution. The houses will be private. If you look at the design of the city, you can see that the houses are separated by lots of trees and plants, so they're isolated from one from another. They're not way out in the sticks, but they're isolated from one to another, so you get the sensation of privacy. You actually get this realization if you can visit the center at Venus and see how they've built the domes there. They're not very far from each other, yet you can't see really one dome from another. They're very private. And you don't hear any noise from them either. And of course, in the future, the houses can be properly soundproofed and so on, so that the cities won't be so horrible to live in as many of them are today.
Well, so far we've talked about the myth of a computer dictator, and then we've talked about lifestyles in the Venus Project. The third topic that I'd like to cover is decision-making. So here now are some quotes from Jacque Fresco during the TeamSpeak seminar.
All decisions will be arrived at rather than made, meaning knowing what the conditions are, what's available, transportation, units to bring building materials to a given place would have to be all collected, all that data. Your decisions are based on the data you collect, not your own feelings. When you hire a group of engineers to design a bridge, they design the bridge. They don't tell you what to do or how to operate your railways. But if you hire a group of engineers to work on railways, they don't tell people what to do. They just design the railways. Corsan does not control people. It merely makes suggestions from a wide range of collected information. And the information it collects is always relevant, has been tested and tried, and it tells you how many ships are available, how many freight trains are available, how many doctors there are, and the best and latest treatment for physical disorders. It gives you information only, and when it doesn't have information, it tells you that we have to do further studies on that in order to arrive at more appropriate decisions. It does not make decisions, it arrives at them. The decisions are not up to computers. They're based on what the computer senses in the environment. If it senses a noxious or poisonous gas, an alarm goes off and awakens you. So these machines do not make decisions. They sense threats in the environment. In other words, if there's a traffic accident in the highway, all the machine will do to tell you that that highway is not accessible, that you take route number 5. That will get you to your destination. It is not the machines making decisions. It's machines responding to problems in the environment. It isn't the machines that make the decisions. The programs are preset for the machines. For example, if you have 7,000 people that need houses, then the machines contact the housing system and indicate how many houses are needed in each given area. That is already known. That's based on the work of the survey committee. When the survey committee tells us we need so much food, so much water, so much clothing, all that is just like the military system or a boat that has 1,000 passengers on the liner. If you have 1,000 passengers, you order so much water, so much food. If you have 2,000 passengers, the people that operate the liner now know just what is needed to handle 2,000 passengers. That's pre-programmed. All that the computers do is carry out the programs which are initiated for them. Each system will depend on resources available, not from the bottom up or top down. In other words, if you put 500 passengers in an airplane that's designed to carry 100, it won't get off the ground. So all decisions are made based upon the physical equipment you're working with or the environmental resources available. They're not made by Fresco or any other person. They're arrived at by studies and research. People that design automated food production and packaging systems do not tell you how to live or what to do. They stay within that discipline unless you ask questions about it.
So now we've heard from Jacque about the decision process. One of the main concerns that I've heard many, many times from people, well, is who's going to be doing the deciding, and is it going to be arbitrary, and so on and so forth. But it's a little bit different. In fact, it's very much different.
Yeah, so this is something that I think is a question that we generally struggle with, because we often don't really ask ourselves that in this system. I think that we're forced upon by the culture to think that we are the ones making decisions and that we are the ones that can have, input on everything, that opinions should be taken into account, from anybody and everybody. And unfortunately, that's not really the most constructive way to arrange things in society. So, and then of course there's always this from today's culture again, this threat, or this, people are scared of having an elite decision-making group that is going to decide, again, similarly to before, how everybody is going to live. And again, here it's, that's not really the case. Decisions, need to be arrived at. They shouldn't be made arbitrarily, like Jacque mentions in these lectures that we just listened to. And that's, that's really something that we need more input into, as far as how these decisions are arrived at. And, when a very simple example is when you have some kind of a problem, a mechanical problem with your car, you don't generally, do a survey of your friends from the dancing school. You go and talk to the mechanic and see, what he has to say, and can he help you fix that. So, on this basic level, we generally understand that decisions are to be made by people that are competent in those areas. But a lot of times with, with human behavior and with politics and all these things that we see, anybody's opinion is just as good as anybody else's, and that doesn't translate well into reality.
And Sue, I'm sure you've heard that question many, many times, or at least seen that question on multiple occasions on Facebook or wherever, where people are asking who's going to make the decisions and so on and so forth. And what would be your typical response to that?
Well, what I actually see a lot of difficulty with is people not understanding what it means to arrive at a decision. Because we talk about, we make a decision, we take a decision, but people don't usually talk about arriving at a decision. So today, in actual fact, in many ways, we do arrive at decisions ourselves. For example, if you're going to buy a car, you have to use a certain amount of information. First of all, you have to look at how much you can afford to pay, and then within that price range you can then look at what's on offer, whether the car has an airbag, whether it has extra seat belts. You can even go as far as the color that you have, if you're going to buy a new car and you've got enough money to be able to have it custom painted, for example. So you put all these pieces of information together and you arrive at the decision that you're going to buy the blue Ford whatever with an airbag and so on. And so you've arrived at that decision by using information. And that's what scientists do. Obviously, they do it with different things. They don't do it the way I've just explained, with the bits that I've just explained. But it's the same system, really. You're using information. And that is what we need to do. We need to arrive at decisions.
And in our quest to arrive at these decisions, we're using technology to do it, which would be in our hands, and these tools would be more than capable of arriving at the best decision possible, better than any human alive.
Yeah, so we can already see to some degree this today. It's not, obviously it's not applied to the social system, which is what we are all about and we would be advocating. But already in scientific fields, you can see that happening now. So, for example, in medical studies, and not just in studies, in medical, delivery of medical answers to different problems that people have. The scientists or doctors, they use cross-referencing computers that then not decide, but they arrive at the best treatment for the person. So, for example, when you have, a cancer or something like that, and there's various treatments that a person can undergo, then there's so many variables that the people in that field just cannot aggregate all that information. So there's a computer that cross-references all these different treatments and takes into account the person's blood type, physiology, DNA information, all these things, and then it comes out with a treatment that is going to have a higher rate of success than somebody to the best of their abilities and their own personal experiences, telling you that oh, this is something that you should do. So we already see this happening today, but it's not, it's applied in very strict parts of certain scientific fields, and we would want to extrapolate that to the whole social system. And really, when you organize the society that way, it functions a lot more adaptably. It functions, faster. There doesn't need to be committee meetings and things like that, because all that slows the reaction time down considerably. So, the easiest example for me always, as far as, these concerns, is the human body. The human body doesn't have a committee somewhere that takes 3 months and do a case study and this, and maybe we'll look if we got the resources to repair, whatever type of infection you have in your foot or whatever. It automatically reacts, and that's really what we need. If there's a problem that is known problem, then we just need a mechanism that is going to fix that problem. And we don't really need any kind of a personal opinion from somebody, hey, we should do this, we should do that, or this is wrong, that's wrong. And that's really what we would want to do with the whole social system.
Sue, when was the last time you used technology to arrive at a decision?
This morning when the alarm clock on my mobile phone went off and it told me it was 6:30 and I had to get up.
For me, it was, I guess, that same example in the morning for me too, but also the navigation, the satellite navigation in my car. So when I went to run an errand, I just put the address into satellite navigation and it took me there. So yeah, I didn't know where it was.
I consider myself a world-class speller, but I am only human. Sometimes I forget, sometimes I get sleepy, and that's when good old spell check comes into play, which I am very grateful for. I don't think I could ever beat spell check in a spelling bee contest, so I do use that every once in a while.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And we saw the computer now beating all the best players in Jeopardy, with answering questions and things like that. So, there's more and more evidence. I think now for us, it's a lot easier to talk about these things than it was for Jacque 50, 60 years ago, where all these things were nowhere to be seen. But now it's, these things are basically demonstratable. But I just feel like people don't really have enough information on the application of these things, and mostly all the negative things of technology that happen are the consequence of human error or just human misuse, and that's really it. I have never heard of a machine attacking a human being up to now.
For our listening audience, I'd like to share two more quotes by Jacque Fresco that deal with decision-making in the Venus Project. Here we go.
I don't want people to follow some leader. I want them to be brought up, educated to understand their decisions, how they arrived at, and the basis for it. I don't want people to follow a leader. That's fascism to me. Whatever I decide will not work. It's what people want that will work. So no one decides whether you become a vegetarian or anything else. What determines that is the availability of food. If we run out of vegetation due to floods or natural disasters, people will consume meat. And if we run out of meat, they will consume vegetables. I have no control over that. That would be up to people.
The takeaway that I received from these two quotes by Jacque Fresco during the TeamSpeak seminars is that he does not intend on having leaders being placed in the Venus Project. Rather, he wants each adult to be their own leader. He wants each adult to have leadership qualities, which is something far different from what we have today. In addition, what I want people to know about the Venus Project is that it's more than just high-tech stuff. It's also about a new way of thinking.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we should try and present to people. Obviously today, in today's world, this is something that's very prevalent. Like there's always, when people rally for something, it seems like, there's always the need to have some kind of charismatic leader and whatnot. But really what we should be doing is we should all try to be that leader. And we know that the way that things are today, we're not going to have Jacque Fresco around forever. And what we really have to do is we have to try and get as much, knowledge and information out now that we can, and then share that with the community. So of course we're fortunate that we can reference his life's work, which is an incredible body of knowledge. But it's up to us to kind of check and recheck things out and understand why they are the way that they are, and not just because Jacque Fresco says it's so, but actually check it out and understand why it is that way. And I think that can be a problem for everybody. Generally, we are easy to to be the followers, but to actually be proactive ourselves takes quite a bit of effort.
Yeah, I also like to sort of bring the topic round to the fact that we believe that we think freely today, but in actual fact we are so influenced by everything that is around us, So do we really think for ourselves, or are we just repeating without realizing it other things that we're hearing? Perhaps one of the most strong evidences for me is this that's happening in the United States now that Donald Trump has become a president. So many people, there's so many hate crimes coming out now, and quoting Trump having said this and Trump having said that. If people really thought for themselves, if they informed themselves before making certain statements, they would realize that all this hate and so on is just totally out of line. So I think that we need to always consider first what the situation is now, today, in the system that we're in, because people are talking about, they won't want us to think for ourselves. You don't think for yourself today. You are influenced by all the information that you get from around you. And in a resource-based economy, we would have relevant information. We wouldn't be watching stupid television shows anymore, or beauty pageants, or, all this kind of rubbish that... I'm going to offend a lot of people now. Football matches, bread and circus, all that sort of stuff is going to disappear. We will have really, truly interesting things to talk about, and our brains will be full of a lot more relevant information. As Jacque says, we need a cerebral enema to get rid of all the crap that we have in it today.
Here and now, what can people do in order to learn about critical thinking?
Information is obviously a highly valued commodity in that respect, but just information itself today is not really enough anymore because we have so much information out there now that it's really, really hard to actually find out, what is relevant. So I would say, relevant information is something that we should be looking for. So the more things that you can find, that you can check out, and that you can, see examples of, that you can see research on, those are the things that we should really be looking at. So, scientific method obviously comes to mind here, to try and use the most approach that works the best, and try to use that as a way to then examine other claims. And that's not as easy to do as it should be, because of all this misinformation. So I would say, any kind of exposure to science, to different scientific fields, especially in the realm of human behavior, automation, social systems, many of the things that, that Jacque talks about here, it will give you, a good perspective of in life, regardless of if you're going to volunteer for the Venus Project or, be somebody that's going to advocate for it. It will help you to live even in today's world, which is obviously vastly different than what we're looking for.
Yes, I'd like to add to that when we talk about the scientific method and so on, you will see a lot of articles out there, whether it's on a newspaper page, whether it's in a blog, whether it's on Facebook. Scientists say, be very careful with this kind of article that begins with scientists say. Very often when you actually read the article, you will find that there are no sources to any scientific study, all right? And then it very often says may, all right? So the title of the article seems to define for sure that this is, science has said this, and then when you read it, it might be, it may be, and then it's just maybe, I don't know, a couple of paragraphs on some crazy topic like, scientists say that there might be a Republican gene, and there's no scientific proof to back it up. So you have to be very careful when you read this kind of article as well. Always make sure that these things are sourced, that they go back to serious studies, that they're not just some newspaper filler of rubbish. You have to learn to be a little bit skeptical when you see things, these statements that are made. Always check them out. Go to Google and put in whatever the title is and see where this comes from. Very often, just lately, there's a lot of images going around that will show you, for example, hate images. I call them hate images, that will say something against Muslims. If you take that image and you upload it into Google Images, you can now do a search, and you will very probably find that the picture was not only of Muslims in Turkey, for example, but that in actual fact it was taken 4 years ago in London, and it was a totally different topic. So do research on things, learn how to check facts before you actually believe them and before you share them out there to other people as well, because you're doing other people a favor if you share correct information. And this is what being relevant is about as well.
Finally, now that we've heard so many quotes from Jacque Fresco himself confirming that TVP is not some kind of techno-dictatorship, let's hear about what he really has in store for people with his vision of the future.
The Venus Project decisions are based upon that which enhances the lives of everyone. And if you're not of that view, I don't think you'd like the Venus Project.
I think that to wrap up this topic and kind of also connect it with the last part that we were talking about, what people can do, I think that obviously educating ourselves about all these topics that the Venus Project covers is very important. And from my point of view, one of the things that I ask myself is when I'm talking about a topic or, considering am I going to look into this or if I'm going to use a certain material, I always try to approach it from, is this going to help me improve my knowledge and, work towards the Venus Project and resource-based economy. And if it's something that is, that is not really important at this time, then, I will leave it for later. And I think that's, also something that we are trying to do here. And definitely, like we mentioned before, this is something that has not been done before. So we have to test it out. We have to think, differently. We have to try and find solutions. We have to try and implement the best of the technologies and the science and the knowledge that we have, and improve the lives of everybody. So for me, just living better for myself is not a long-term solution, because there are so many ways that the world as it is can negatively influence my life. So it's really the ultimate selfishness of me personally is that I want everything for everybody, because that means that I'm going to be, as secure and as safe as I can be in this world. Otherwise, there's always going to be, people that will try to get what they can't have, et cetera, and therefore we'll always have violence and different conflicts. And basically what Jacque and the Venus Project is advocating for is to transcend, to get across all these problems and develop a civilization that can then focus on the relevant things in life.
I'd just like to add that many of the misunderstandings, in fact, I say most of the misunderstandings people have is because they haven't looked into it enough. And unfortunately today we live in what I call the fast food society. We want everything now, yesterday if possible. And this is over 70 years of work that's gone into this concept. So you're not going to understand it from just a couple of documentaries that you see. Take time, bit by bit, go through the website completely, watch the videos on the YouTube channel, ask questions, and the more you learn, the more you come to understand, and the more you understand that there is still more to learn, which is, to me, one of the most amazing things. So, if you don't think you like TVP, I honestly think it's because you haven't looked into it enough yet. Because so far I haven't found anything that I don't find would improve the lives of everybody.
That's all we have for the first major myth about the Venus Project, techno-dictatorship. Now we'd like to move on to the second myth about the Venus Project. Critics often claim that the Venus Project is just a utopia, but let's find out what Jacque really thinks. Let's find out from the Venus Project's point of view.
The question is your city utopian? It is not utopian. There's no such thing as utopia. We're always modifying things. There are no final frontiers. There's no way to design a society that's optimal or utopian. It's better than the one that was. Systems always undergo change. There's no such thing as designing the perfect utopian city. Everything is subject to change. There are no final frontiers. Any assumption of finality or utopia is really stupid, because there's never been any evidence to show that a person could design the best laptop. You can design the best laptop that you're familiar with at that time, but they'll always get smaller, faster, more appropriate, lighter in weight. There are no final frontiers. There are no utopias, no best way of doing things. There's always a more appropriate way of doing things. There's no such thing as the best. There's always the best we know of up to now. And next year we'll know more about it. So the word the best will never be used in the future any more than the perfect automobile or the utopian city. No such thing. Things always undergo change, including the Venus Project and the resource-based economy will continue to undergo modification and change. There's no such thing as final frontiers.
I'm going to read to you right now frequently asked question number 100, which addresses the issue of utopia. The Venus Project is not a utopian concept. We do not believe in the erroneous notion of a utopian society. There is no such thing. Societies are always in a state of transition. We propose an alternative direction which addresses the causes of many of our problems. There are no final frontiers for human and technological achievement. It will always undergo change. Even if we can design a society having all the modifications to improve the lives of people and protect the environment, we will still be at the beginning of the next phase. We are always in transition and learning new things. The survival of any social system ultimately depends upon its ability to allow for appropriate change to improve society as a whole. The patterns we choose determine whether or not there is intelligent life on Earth. In closing, to achieve this new social design, it will require much voluntary, unselfish participation for its realization. The future does not depend solely on the Venus Project. We only propose a direction. Our future depends on the decisions we make today, end quote. And again, that is frequently asked question number 100 from thevenusproject.com. So, Sue, what would you like to say about that?
Yes, society is always evolving. If it didn't, we'd still be living in the caves. You know, there's always changes being introduced. And since we started using heavy technology to distinguish from the first tools that the caveman made, since the Industrial Revolution perhaps, we've advanced very much faster than previously. So we have to understand that society is not static. The question is, how do we move? Which direction do we move in to evolve? If we evolve in a way that is good for everyone and good for the planet, or if we carry on destroying the planet and killing people and just making an absolute balls up of it.
What I wanted to maybe just quickly address is that I believe that many people have a problem with the project itself from the point of view that they feel that it is, too far beyond what we have right now. Generally, that's a pretty common realization that we hear. And for the most part, I feel it's because, people don't really know what is possible today. They're not really aware, at least not in large enough numbers, what can be done, what kind of automation is already available, what is already happening today. It seems that, the values that we have and the ways that we live is very much archaic, basically. But our technology is way, way ahead of us. So, many people just feel that, oh, no work, oh, no money, you'll never see that happen, just kind of wave it off. And I think that's the stage or the place where they're at. And then, they put this label, oh, it's utopia, we're never going to achieve it. And in the past, it has shown that when people did that they were for the majority wrong about, what they were talking about. So, the example of, oh, you'll never see a man fly, oh, we'll never get to the moon, we'll never do this, we'll never do that. And, it turns out most of those things are just opinions from people that you have really no background in the actual technology behind what, that goal would require. So I think that's mostly what drives this argument. People just don't really have anything to connect it with in today's world, and therefore they assume it's something that will never be.
100 years ago, if you were to describe modern society, they would consider it to be a utopia. It's like, what? You mean there's no horse manure on the streets and you can actually walk the sidewalks at night without getting mugged?
Yeah, exactly. I definitely think that's the case. I mean, imagine explaining before, World War I or something like that. Imagine explaining to somebody that they're going to have this, little few inches size box that they can take with them, and they can, take pictures and shoot videos and send them halfway around the world in the next second, and talk to everybody around the world as they're walking around. It would be unimaginable. Nobody, for the practical purposes, nobody would really believe that that's ever possible. And yet we see that today as common, as not even strange anymore. So yeah, this is definitely something that we should keep in mind, when we're talking about these things. And like Jacque also gives the example, the kings of old that owned, quote unquote, or conquered, half of the globe, of the known world, they didn't have anywhere near as good of a lifestyle than what an average person has today. So, to use these sweeping generalizations, oh, never going to see this, oh, never going to see that, it seems like it doesn't make any sense. And most of these things have turned out to be the exact opposite.
And I think also another one of the comments that is quite frequent to see is, oh, you'll never get people to agree to this. There's always going to be greedy people. There's always going to be violent people and so on. These people need to have a look into human behavior rather than thinking that it's human nature, because we aren't born with these traits. These are things that are taught, that we learn as we grow up. And so if we live, it's not just the Venus Project that talks about this. There are now many other experts out there who are talking about the effect of the environment on human behavior. So if you're brought up in a violent environment, maybe, violent parents, or just the neighborhood is a violent neighborhood, the chances are that you're going to grow up aggressive as well. And if you then change the environment of the person and bring them into an environment that is calmer, eventually they will change. But if you start with a child in a peaceful environment, then they will grow up peaceful. So what the plan is to create an environment that is nutritional mentally for human beings, that there is no violence, that there is no greed, that there is no competition. Everything will be provided for us. We won't have to worry about getting to the end of the month if we're going to have enough money. And this will remove a lot of stress. So we need to look into human behavior as well to understand how this is possible. If we change the environment and we have a positive environment for people to grow up in, that's nurturing and so on, then this is also going to go hand in hand with the technology. The two things have to go together. The change in values and behavior and the wise use of technology.
As Sue was saying earlier, this is something that you can't just swallow in just one gulp. It requires a lot of studying. So, Sue, where would the best place to start as far as learning more about the Venus Project goes?
Okay, well, everybody's different. So if you're the sort of person that likes documentaries, I would suggest that you watch the 3 documentaries that the Venus Project has produced. The first one was called Future by Design, and it touches on the technological part of this. They have shown it a few weeks ago on CCN. If you didn't get to see it, you can check out the archives of CCN's videos and watch it there, or you can go to the Venus Project YouTube channel and watch it there. The second one was called Paradise or Oblivion. And the third one, the latest one, is called The Choice is Ours, which is perhaps the most complete because it talks about not just the problems that we face, but it also talks about how technology can help us and also about a change in values. It's the most complete of the 3 documentaries. And then the website. The website is something that is undervalued. You need to look through it. If you don't have to sit through it and read it all in one go, bit by bit. click on all the buttons, read everything that's there, look into it deeper, and then look at the videos on the YouTube channel. Definitely the best information is going to come from the original source. All these copies that there are out there, don't get me off on that topic, you can check the original source.
Okay, Saso, is there anything that Sue left out?
I think we pretty much covered everything. Maybe for before we go, for people that like to read books, either physical or digital, the best that money can't buy is probably perhaps the most coherent and complete set of information on what resource-based economy really is. And at the same time, you can support a little bit the Venus Project, because it's the book that they have themselves produced and published. So you can do that online, again, on the website, thevenusproject.com. And there's all there. There's a YouTube channel, the Venus Project, where you can find more material, different lectures, seminars, etc. So there is plenty of free online material for those that like to watch clips, videos, and lectures.
And actually, if I may just butt in one more time, a couple of weeks ago I did a broadcast for CCN where I talked about the best place to go for information for the Venus Project. Sasha's completely correct. The book is also an excellent source of information, and the CD lectures that are available from the website too. But if you can't remember all this and you want links and so on, in the talk that I gave a couple of weeks ago, you'll find them.
Well, I guess that wraps it up. I'd like to thank you, the listener, for joining us today and hearing what we had to say about techno-dictatorship and utopia. With me was Sue Everatt from Spain and Saso Luznar from Slovenia. And thank you again. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you learn more about the Venus Project. Thanks, and as Jacque would say, have a great life.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire, the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world. And this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.